Cool. So I just wanted to let you guys know we're on Facebook Live already. Hey, Scully. Hey. Long time. Hello.
Hi, Jay. Long time, very long time. I was even asking.
I've been doing self-care, my friend. I think that's become so important. It is the discussion for us today as well. So yes, I've been practicing what we preach.
Good for you. We can learn.
I've just been learning to reprioritize. So I've had to rethink and juggle around. So, but yes, it's part of self-care. So yes. So let me greet everyone that's here in the room with us and everyone that's on Facebook Live. Hello. Welcome to one of our Thursday sessions at Womanico. We're so glad that you're here. We're so glad that you log on, and we know you might not listen to this live. You might listen to this a little bit later as well, but you're welcomed nonetheless. We wanted to just remind you that we used to do this weekly, but now we start to do it fortnightly because we know people have gone back to work and you're juggling many things. And so to be responsive to your needs, we've decided to do this fortnightly. So every second week, you'll find us here, same place, same time, trying to bring you some content that's going to help you to grow and transform the space you're in. And sometimes that means the inner space. So today we're in conversation together with Tembela. So before I go any further, let her say hello to you. Otherwise, it seems like I'm the only chatterbox here, but I'm not. Tembela.
Thanks, Jay. Hi, Sko. Hi, Busi. Hi, Bulelwa. And hi to those people who are on Facebook. I'm not able to check our Facebook chat today, but we'll see. But thank you so much for being here today. It's actually very interesting because after having, a 2 weeks break, I was kind of feeling I'm missing this space. Yet the interesting thing is that every time we come into this space, I always feel shivers within me. And I think especially for a session like the one we are going to have today, where we have to dig a little bit deeper into that inner space. It's not always an easy thing to do. But hey, I know that I'm in a safe space. And Bulelwa, it is so good to see you. It's so good that you are here. I wish I can actually see your face. But anyway, I will not put pressure on you. Sure.
Great. Thank you so much. So today we want to tell you something about a campaign that we're running. So we're running a campaign called Dare to See. And I'm not going to tell you much about it, but if you go to page. So if you're on it currently and watching on Facebook Live, just scroll and you're going to find out about that campaign. But we'd really like for you to find out more about it, join the campaign, and we're going to do a launch in a couple of weeks. So look out for that. But as our community, we'd love for you to partner with us on that campaign. And so today we're going to talk about stress and self-management. And even though that's the broad theme that we're working on, and we're going to talk about it maybe for the next couple of weeks, today we're going to talk about specifically baggage. So it's about offloading baggage, and it's about being aware of the baggage that we carry. And we all have it, right? We all have baggage, whether we like it or not. We carry this baggage around. Tembela says, not me. She's such a liar. We all have it. Whether we like it or not, we're all carrying a bag filled with all sorts. And so as part of our stress and self-management series, we thought this is something that we could pause on and talk about because we think everybody has it, and it's really something we don't pay attention to. And the not paying attention to it is where the problem lies, because like any kind of baggage, the more stuff you stuff into it, it gets to a point where that baggage is just going to burst open and you deal with the aftermath. And so today we're hoping to just dive in, and we're going to do that using stories. So you know that one of our greatest tools at Womanico is storytelling. And so we're going to use storytelling as our way to surface what happens when we carry baggage and when we don't learn to offload it. And how do we start to recognize when we do have baggage? What are the triggers And then what do you do when you notice a trigger? So that's really what we hope to cover today. Once again, we're so glad that you're here. And with that, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you about a time that I packed a little bit too much. So I was going to the US in 2015. I was going to certify as a coach. And I was on my way to the US with my sister. And we were going for 2 weeks. We were first going to the John Maxwell team for my certification. And then back to back from that, we were going to do Unleash the Power Within with Tony Robbins, live with Tony Robbins. It was really exciting, and it was 2 weeks, and it was winter time. Obviously not in Orlando, because we're going to Orlando, and then we were going to New York. And in New York, it was going to be freezing cold. So I packed for both seasons, for summer, which is what happens in Florida all of the time. And then I also packed for winter because we were going to be in New York. But I had the super large suitcase just filled with anything and everything I thought I would need. So we get to the airport here at OR Tambo, and then they weigh my baggage and they tell me like, I'm so sorry, babe, you're over. So either you pay for the extra or you take some stuff off. So my brother-in-law, Tony, was with us. So we went and got a bag, and then I said, oh, okay, maybe I take this out, take this out. So you know what it's like? Like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, one, because people are watching you, like, scratching your bag, trying to see what is it you need to take out, and think, like, why didn't this person pack properly in the first place? So, okay, you have to deal with that embarrassment, and I'm sure everyone's done that at some point in time. So finally, we get it to the right kgs, and my bag goes through. It goes through and it's fine. We arrive in the US, and from the airport, we get onto a shuttle. So I'm not feeling the weight of this bag, right? Because you're just wheeling it around. You're not really feeling the weight. So we get to the airport, and then we go to the conference, and I use what I need, and it's great. And I have options, and there's loads of things in there. Then we pack up, and now we get to New York. So we fly from Orlando to New York. So when we got to New York, we were not going to obviously pay crazy prices to use like a taxi or a shuttle. We were smart enough to say, let's just use the subway. Now, if you've gone to the US and you've used the subway, then you know I was going to be in some serious trouble with this overloaded bag of mine. So in the subway, you can't get to use lifts, and there's no escalators. So what you have to do is carry, like, go upstairs and like go up, down, up and down, depending on what your platform is. And you know, it's underground. The subway is like far underground. So you're going to climb quite a number of stairs. And this is where it all fell apart for me, because I just couldn't carry this bag of mine. So you know you do that thing on stairs, right, where you like take one step, so you let your bag lean on you, and then you take a step, and then using your body as a like to propel you to the next step. So I kept doing this, but I was like, it was hard, and this bag was heavy, and I was slow, and you know, you need to get there at a certain time so you can get to your train. And so eventually Elaine told me, like, why did you pack all these things? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're going to make us so late. And she was so mad at me. So she was quite agile. She packed quite light. She had done this trip a few times before, so she knew what she was getting into. I didn't. And so while struggling, suddenly someone just comes and they take my bag from me and they start carrying it. But this someone is a homeless person who lives in the subway. And so he decided he'd carry my bag to whichever platform I was going. The problem is, he said, I didn't ask him, he just did it. And number two, he was really stinky because he made both a popo and a pee-pee in his pants that had dried. So it was like, he was really smelly, but not yet my suitcase. So as he's going, I'm running behind him, trying to like make sure he doesn't run away with all my whole life in this bag. And I'm going with him and going with him. Finally, I get to the platform and he drops it down, and then he tells me $20. So I'm like, he wasn't doing me a favor. he wasn't being a generous soul. He wants me to pay him for all this. So I mean, he was a homeless person, and he was really stinky. And I mean, I'm not making a judgment, but I know life is hard and things. But it was just like, okay. So I took the $20, I gave it to him, and I was glad that I was at the platform that I needed. And okay, fine. So we get onto the train, and you know, you're like, okay, we made it. But just when you think, okay, you made it, you arrive at the next station and then you have to deal with this luggage again and make your way up, like up from the subway, up onto the street. And so, okay, again, I have to be more careful that no one just comes and grabs the bag from me and goes. And so I really struggled. I struggled all the way until we got to where we need to in New York, and Tony Robbins was in New Jersey, so we were going to take a bus. So now we finished the train, now we need to take the bus to New Jersey. And we get to the bus station, obviously me struggling with this heavy bag and everything. And the bus drivers are the ones who normally load the suitcases in New York, yeah. And so this guy picks up my bag, at least he attempts to, and he just can't, like, it's like, oh gosh, what do you have in this bag? And then I smiled at him, and then he says, a dead person? And then Elaine says, yeah, I think she has a dead person in there. And then he has this look of horror on his face. Now, like, I am Indian, like they have this thing about Indian people and, suicide bombers, and like, you don't make certain jokes when you go to certain places. And so I looked at him like, what is wrong with you? I'm like, no, I don't have a dead, I mean, like, there's just clothing in there, lots of them. And so he says, gosh, it's really heavy. So he manages to get someone else to help him. They pack it, they push it in. And then we get to New Jersey. And okay, fine, that was me, like with my big luggage, and really struggled the whole way. And then when we get to the hotel, I'm unpacking stuff because now I'm trying to get the winter clothes out and push all of the summer clothes to the bottom. And that's when I had this biggest awareness. I realized that I didn't need to pack 2 sets, like for 2 summers. I needed to pack 1 set of clothes and just take a really big jacket that was going to keep me warm for New York. And I could have worn all of the clothes that I was wearing in Florida. And then it became so aware to me that I slowed Elaine and myself down. I frustrated myself. It cost me. I had to pay the homeless person money for carrying it. I inconvenienced myself in ways that just like irritated myself, that I didn't enjoy the journey, because the journey became about me carrying this luggage and getting my luggage safely to wherever I needed it to go. And so I really lost a lot out of that whole journey because I just overpacked. I carried too much luggage. I carried too much baggage with me. And ever since then, I made an agreement with myself. And I told myself, if I'm traveling somewhere, no matter what length it is, I will only pack a carry-on bag. So now if you tell me, Cheryl, I'm taking you for 2 weeks to I don't know where, I will only come with a carry-on luggage, irrespective of the length of that trip. Because I've become so good at traveling light and only taking what I need. So I know you must be thinking like, okay, where's she going with this baggage story? But what I wanted us to surface using my story about baggage is we do the same thing in life. Emotionally, we do the exact same thing. We have emotions that we don't deal with, that we pack and we pack and we pack. And in doing that, we never actually offload our baggage. And so we're just carrying heavy bags around us. And in doing that, it makes life harder. It makes life so much more frustrating. It frustrates people who are around us. I frustrated Elaine with my luggage, and it cost me a lot. And so for me, it might have cost me in time and in money, but in life, it might cost us relationships, besides money and time as well. And so just using that story, we're going to surface how we carry baggage around and how it affects us. And so with that, I'm going to ask Tembela a lot of questions today. So it's really conversational. And for those of you who are in the room with us, we're hoping that you will tell us if you have a baggage story too. So Tembela, tell me, was there a moment when you realized you were carrying too much baggage around?
First, before I answer that question, do I really need to lay off my stuff in front of everyone?
Yes, I think it's important that you do for the greater good. For the greater good, can we look at what is your baggage story and what's inside your...
Okay. It's actually embarrassing, Shay. I mean, if you think of it. I found myself in a great organization. I've landed myself this nice job. And so I was asked, to deliver my first big assignment. I've brought everybody around. And the interesting thing about that time is that unlike my previous work, I had to do everything, you know, like from inviting people, writing the list, to everything, to technical stuff. And then remember, before I joined this organization, I was a big person in my organization. I was a director in the organization. So I just used, there are things that I never used to have to worry myself about. I would just delegate other people to do that work. And now here I am, all of a sudden, I'm no longer this big boss. I have to do almost everything. So I think I found this quite overwhelming. And this time, I mean, in fact, the day before the event itself, I actually didn't sleep well. Not at all. So I might have slept perhaps for about 3-4 hours. And so you can imagine I was really, really tired. So I'm supposed to speak now in front of people. I'm the one who has invited the people into this event. And now there I was when it is time for me to start talking. Oh my goodness, I panicked. I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what was going on. In fact, I don't think it was just a panic. I think it was a panic attack, or whether it was an anxiety attack or whatever. But like anyway, I just couldn't control what was going on. And it was such an embarrassment. I mean, if you think about it. And I think at that moment for me, I actually realized there's something not quite right, because speaking in front of people is something that I had always done. I had spoken in international platforms and it was never an issue. And even if I was tired, I could just do it and decide after the event, I will just, you know, like find a space to relax. So this time it was just one of those things that I couldn't explain as to what was going on in my life. In fact, the person who was facilitating kept on saying to me, Tembela, breathe, Tembela, breathe. And at that time, I have not even learned, you know, this whole technique, you know, of like breathing to calm yourself. So, yeah. And then I think for me, that moment actually made me realize that there was a lot of stuff that I was going through, which I was not aware of, I had not processed, but like I knew that what was going on there was not just a matter of panicking, you know, for that moment. It was, I actually think when I looked at the people that were there and what was going on, it was something that had some roots and that needed to be really reflected on, and ask myself deeper questions as to what's going on here.
So let me hear you, right? So what you're actually saying is, you knew that you had this panic attack or this anxiety episode, but that was really a trigger, right? Like it
Yes.
was a trigger. So something, whatever it was, whatever situation you found yourself got triggered, and that anxiety was the trigger that told you something is going on. Do you think that a lot of the times we have triggers, but we don't actually ask ourselves what's going on? Like we think, oh, we have anxiety, or we have panic attacks, or my heart is beating like irregularly, and then we quickly go to the doctor, or we go and take like me nutrient spray, and you take your I know at one point I even suggested you take that spray, right? It's the anxiety spray, and I think sometimes we must, right? But we don't actually ask ourselves, so I'm feeling this, why am I feeling it? What's actually going on? What's beneath the surface of just this top surface thing that's going on? And so something is driving it. So maybe tell us, what was, I mean, if you could be speak, and I know you've spoken on a number of platforms and you've been speaking since you were a student, what happened? What drove that behavior? What drove that trigger to happen for you? Why would you suddenly have anxiety when you were speaking in public?
Perhaps let me go back to the first question you asked, whether this happens often, like to people, and perhaps they're not aware. I think when you have something like that and it just happens once, it may be an indication that perhaps there was something going on at that particular time. But I think if it happens often, then you really need to, take a step back and reflect and ask yourself serious questions as to what is really going on. Because like in my case, I think the one thing that made me to really think quite seriously about what was going on is because after that event, besides the fact that I was embarrassed, but after that event, I found myself that every time I went into a meeting, I mean, just a conversation like this, and having to talk about my work, when I go in, I think my mind would remember what had happened, and then I would have this panic attack again, and it happened a number of times, and so I think for us, if there is a pattern, you can actually notice that there is a pattern. Then you need to stop and ask yourself, what's really going on here? And I think for me, that is one thing that made me to really reflect. But if it was just something that had happened once, or if it would have been a matter of saying, perhaps I was just tired, you know. And in fact, the first time when this happened, like as I've mentioned, I was quite overwhelmed, I was tired. And so my body has just had it. Yeah.
Cool. So I was asking, what do you think was, my second question was, what do you think drove you to that point? Like, to get to feeling anxiety or feeling those palpitations, or something must have, I mean, triggers it. I think something must have changed, because like I was saying, you used to do this previously fine, but something happened. And did you, I mean, maybe you haven't done the reflection, and I'm putting you on this one, but I'm knowing that you're a coach, I have a feeling you did go and look one layer beneath that, what's really going on.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for me, for one, at that moment I was tired, but also I had just come from another job that was quite tiring, and I must say, for most part of my time in that organization, I mean, it was quite traumatic. I mean, I had some nice moments, but like, it was really a stressful environment for 3 years. And within that time, one of the things that had happened was that I found myself in a job that was always filled by men and also by theologians. And I was not a man, and I was also not a theologian. And so what I found was that for my entire tenure in that organization, there was always this back and forth between myself and staff. So for instance, I could say things and I know that I'm quite confident about what I'm talking about. I've thought it through, but I find that it was always second guessed. So people wouldn't just take what I'm saying or engage with it, but you could actually see that there's something else as to why they are not accepting. And what I found was that it was always, I mean, for many times I needed to have somebody else, either a board member who would support my ideas, or perhaps a funder who would support my ideas before the staff could actually say, yes, we're hearing you. And so I'm not sure if that's what the staff would say, but that's my reading of that's what was going through my mind. So I think throughout that time, I went through a process where I was always hearing these voices that firstly, we can't believe what you're saying, that you're not good enough, you're not a theologian, so you're not. So I think for me, I found I think that was one of the drivers. So you have a voice that is going on there in my mind, and you know that I keep on hearing, but without necessarily processing that voice and what's going on, and it shows up in a different place where I feel like. And again, I'm not even sure if I was aware of this at the time, but the one thing is I needed to prove myself that I'm worth the job that I have, and in that moment, I'm sure I believe that my mind, firstly, the fact that I was tired, but also secondly, because I was not feeling like I'm relaxed and all that, and I have to prove myself over and over again, perhaps my mind connected what was going on at that moment with the voices that I've heard over time. And the other thing for me is that when I left the previous job, I never really had time to process and relax and actually, stay away from all that noise and feel like I'm okay before I can move on into a new job. So I think those are some of the layers and of the things that have been going on that have actually filled, you know, like this bag, like your bag that I was carrying. But what is interesting is that I was not aware of what was going on in my mind at that time. But of course, like as I was saying earlier, because I found myself going through this series of panic attacks, it made me to actually stop and really think seriously about what was going on in my life. And then I think part of it for me, it was very clear that the baggage that I had carried from the previous organization and without processing it was actually following me up into this new organization.
Yeah. So I know that you told me that you can go and drink you can drink your tea. That's great.
I have
I think you were telling me as well that like part of that working at the previous organization and working, like you said, was most like who held your position was previously men and mostly theologians. Also unconsciously gave you this story or this narrative that told you that women can't do this or shouldn't do this or need to constantly prove themselves to be able to show that you're equal to or better than a man who can do this job. And then going to your next job without sitting and having that break to unpack your bag. So the one organization bag, you needed to unpack it before you started the journey to the next one. I think without doing that, you kind of took it to that job and you just kept adding new things. So there's two things I wanted to talk to us about that. Like one about how when you don't deal with issues, how you take it to the next one. So for you, for example, even though you might have always spoken on a global stage, going to this particular, like doing this particular stint made you start to question yourself, yet you were fully capable of doing this and you do it, and you did do it many times before, but you took an old situation, an old narrative, and you brought it to a new situation. I want to contextualize that with the story I heard just recently about how in marriages that kind of happens. Some people who get remarried, or you might be in a relationship and you move to a new relationship, if you were cheated on in the previous relationship, you get into the new relationship and you constantly second guessing that person. If they leave the house, you wonder where they're going. If they come back late, you think like, could they be with somebody else? But yet that person could have valid reasons as to why they went early or late or whatever the situation is. But you have a narrative in your mind that people will do that to you. What happened previously will happen again. And so for you, I think it was important for you to surface that, that narrative about, am I good enough to be able to be on this platform and eat like I normally do? Or are people going to second guess me? And I think the other thing that is important to notice, baggage can, when we get triggered, we can get triggered in two ways, right? One from a stress perspective externally, and then emotionally. So for you, that was an emotional response, dealing with that inner voice, which we call Thelma. So dealing with that voice in your head that tells you whatever narrative you got used to, or externally when you get stressed. And I was sharing with you this the other day. And so I don't have kids. I have fur babies. I have dogs. And one night I had not slept. I like went through a whole day. I didn't sleep that whole night. And the next day I was sitting at my desk, and Benjamin, my dog, he barked at something. I don't know what he barked, but he has this really intense bark that if you're concentrating on something, he can like shock you into reality. And so he barked, and I got so annoyed with him that I shouted at him like, "Why are you barking?" And I was like, I was shouting at a dog, right? Like, it's not like he can talk back to me and say like, "There's a person passing and I'm barking at the person." No, like, and so I quickly caught myself and I had to say like, what's going on? Why am I so on edge? But I was only on edge because I hadn't slept.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens with stresses, external stresses. Like you don't sleep enough, you don't rest enough, you don't deal with the fight you had with your husband or a workmate. And then the next minute you're snapping at everyone else around you. And I think it's important to notice that. Like sometimes just look, you might just be sleep deprived. You might not be managing your time well. You might not be juggling. You might not be delegating. And so you're feeling overwhelmed by all of that. And so then that'll trigger you to do something you don't normally do. Like for me, shouting at Benjamin, for example, or you getting a panic attack for speaking in public. But for you, it was that internal voice in your head. So how did you deal with that voice in your head? Once you knew it was a story, it was a narrative, and it was linked back to a situation in your previous job, how did you get over it? You're talking to me, so I'm assuming that you're over it.
Well, I'm not sure if I'm over it, because like right now, as I'm talking about this, I'm actually feeling the heaviness on my shoulders. So it actually tells you that I'm still in that journey.
No, I hope that it's not because of that. I'm hoping it's because you have lots of work.
No. No, anyway, I think for me, Sher, I firstly, yes, I think part of it, I mean, I couldn't stay in that space forever, so I had to find a way of dealing with it. I never went to see somebody at the time. Like later on, I did go and see a coach, but there were I think I found that there were immediate things that I needed to deal with. So on one hand, I had to deal with the level of stress, like the overload, and just understand that whether I like it or not, there's no way that I could be a secretary take minutes, write those reports, and then to do the technical work at the same time. So that's one of the immediate things that I had to do, make sure that I get the kind of support that I need to be able to do all that I needed to do, because to be honest, I was really being stretched beyond what one individual person can actually do and deal with. And the other thing for me was just a reminder of, I had to remind myself of the things that I'm good at, because I knew that it's not that I was not good in that job. It's just that that's how the job was structured. And I thought I could do all of it, and perhaps I could have negotiated for different conditions of work and all that. But anyway, at least I was able to say, okay, reframe that and remind myself that I have actually done this thing and I'm actually good at this. And right now I have not slept. And that's why I actually behaved, or I actually found myself in that kind of a predicament. And then I think the second thing that I had to do for me was just looking around at the team that I was working with and trying to see what are those things that I can do as a person and what are the things that I can actually rely on from other people. So I had to draw on the strengths of the other people within my team and know that, well, I'm not an expert in this, but there are people in my team that are experts in particular areas. Because in fact, if you think about it, the thing that I was doing at that time, it was not even a technical issue, but I think because I felt that I was not good enough, so that might have affected me. Anyway, finding support from other people, making sure that I don't have to do everything that is out there, and actually contracting somebody else who would do that admin stuff that I didn't like. And that was just taking a lot of energy from me. And then just reminding me of my strengths and what I'm good at. That's the easy part, which was really more about dealing with the level of stress. The difficult part for me, I think, was really dealing with the emotional issues that I was keeping inside of me. And I think part of it, as I was saying, I was new in that job when I experienced this. So at that time, I was not even able to name what was going on inside of me. But in time, I actually had to go and find a coach who helped me to process. And in that process of that coaching journey, it surfaced, a lot of things that I was sitting on, and things that I was not even able to connect with what was going on inside of me. And it's actually interesting that even when I left that job, I actually found that it's not like when I left, I was healed. And I think for me, part of starting an organization for myself was realizing that I was not ready to go into another job where I will have to deal with a lot of baggage and stuff like that. And so I needed to actually deal with myself outside of institutions and kind of like go through a process of surfacing all of that. But also for me, the other part about it is that when I decided to start an organization, it was just a realization that my own healing is intertwined with other people's healing. Because to be honest, in as much as I came with a baggage from another organization, I also added, like a lot of issues. And I also, from this organization that I was working for. And again, because of the pressure to perform, pressure on me, pressure like on my manager and all that, it was still, for me, it was like a continuation of what I had come from. And again, without, like, if I go back to your analogy, without taking out, some of the luggage and, like offloading some of the luggage, but just piling and piling. And it really was a long journey, and as I was saying, it is, I can't necessarily say I'm totally healed, but the fact that I'm able to talk about it publicly shows that I'm in a much better space than I was when I left.
100%. I think what's so important for me is something that you said that my mother uses as an analogy. She says, if you don't deal with issues, it's like you filling a champagne bottle and you keep filling and filling, but you keep putting the cork in and you fill it and you keep, and she says, eventually when you take the cork out, everything spills out and then it's just a mess. And she says, life should never be a hot mess. It's about, can you unpack as something. So my mom's very confrontational, and growing up is really hard. Like, she just like talks about it head on. But it's because she lives with that kind of philosophy. If something troubles her, she'll talk about it, sort it out, get it done with, and then you continue with life and you just don't leave unresolved issues packing up on each other. And I think that's so important how you said, take the time to unpack that luggage. I think we don't learn to take time out. We don't take time to learn to, like, can you do the reflection? Can you ask yourself, what did you learn? What served you? What do you take from this experience into your next experience? And what do you leave behind that's no longer serving you?
Yeah.
But because we learn that from emotional intelligence, our school curriculum doesn't cover those kind of things. We kind of just take every situation packed on each other and we move forward. And unfortunately, like how Elaine had to deal with like my madness and my big bag and all of its overflow, when we go through life, people around us are experiencing that as well, right? Whether it's our children or our spouses, whether it's the people we live closest to or the people we work with, everybody kind of has to deal with all of that. And so it's so essential for us as humanity to do not just ourselves that service, but also for those around us. If we're going to create healthy workplaces, which is what we focus on a lot at Women Eco, it's really about how do I deal with me? How do I self-manage me? And when I can take responsibility for me and my actions and my emotions, then the person next to me is doing the same. And eventually we have these happy workplaces because everyone's taking responsibility for themselves. I think we talk about, oh, the workplace needs to change. And I think it must. And I think systemic issues at the workplaces need to change. And that's something we work really hard at Women Eco. But at the same time, workplaces are made up of people.
Yeah.
We bring our stuff to the workplace. I think it's both. It's dual. It's, can I do the work on me? And then can you allow us at Women Eco to help work with your organization and help them figure out what's going wrong and what they can do better? And I know we were talking about this a few weeks ago, and you and I highlighted it in our conversation this week as well, that there's really a need for managers and leaders to understand, how do you better serve those that you lead? How do you help them to achieve rather than just manage them in a way that they just feel like they're pawns in your little system rather than valuable partners in your company? So I think that was so important for us to surface about sitting quietly and unpacking and reflecting. I want to talk about, we have a few minutes left, and so in the chat, I don't see anyone saying anything, and I cannot see Facebook at this moment either, so I'm not sure if anyone's saying anything there. But I thought one of the things we could talk about is those narratives. So I think even though it might play out and we're talking about baggage, I think we all live with different kinds of narratives that go on in our minds. One that I'm not good enough, I'm not worth, I'll never be as good as her or him. Those opportunities are for them, it's not for us. So there's these stories that we bought into that either society has told us, or our growing up, or our bringing up has told us, or the church has told us, or the mosque, or whatever it is. We have these stories that we say in our minds. And I know for you in that case where you sort of say, yeah, but this role's only beheld by men, and only men who understand the Bible and study the Bible and understand, like, the context of how this organization started. And I don't have my theology degree or a PhD in theology, and I'm certainly not a man, and I'm not going to make decisions like a man. And so did that change a narrative in your mind that you needed to challenge when you went to your new workplace? Because I also know when you went to your new workplace, you faced some gender discrimination in that workplace as well. But was the story that was going on that needed challenging in your mind? And I'd be really interested to know, how did you do that? How did you reframe that narrative, and how did you reframe that story?
Sha, it's actually difficult because for me, like as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to your questions as well, I'm actually thinking, I don't think for me there was a neat plan, that says this is how I'm going to go about. I just lived life, and I think, again, before I answer your question, I hope I remember it. It's actually interesting that at that time when I was going through this, I was not fazed by the fact that I was not a theologian, I was not a man. I was actually not fazed by it because I was quite confident of what I knew. And then also because I've been working in the sector for quite a long time. And the reason why I want to go back there is because sometimes we go through life, without having spaces in between to reflect. You go through life unawares of what is actually going on. Because for me, that voice that I was hearing from what was going on in the organization, I was not aware that this is what is actually going on. It's actually much later that I realized that, oh, okay, there's a connection. And I think rephrasing the narrative, I must have touched on that. Well, I think for me, one of the things that helped me was, firstly at home, was getting somebody who could support me, who's a systems thinking practitioner, who every time would remind me, this is not about you. So like whenever, like the whole thing of self-differentiation, is one of the things for me that actually helped me along the journey to actually differentiate myself from what was going on in the organization, and also be able to say, this is where Tembela begins and this is where Tembela ends. But also be able to look at the situations that I was confronted with and read those situations and actually be able to say, this is patriarchy. This is, this is a problem that belongs to the organization. The only thing that is happening here is that because I'm the face of the organization, I have to carry a baggage that does not belong to me. And so I think for me, one of the big things that was really helpful was that whole thing of self-differentiation. Yeah, and again, like I think I mentioned earlier, the issue about reminding myself of what I'm good at, but also over and above that. So, for instance, I worked with men who in this other organization who were very blunt, because I think in the other organization some of these things were not right on your face. It would be like. I think you would realize that there's something that is not right when you see a particular behavior, and then when you study that behavior, you actually now begin to see, oh, okay, this is what is playing out here. But in the other organization, I learned to, over and above, like differentiating myself and also reading the situations. I also decided that there are things that I need to challenge. So for instance, one of the things that I used to do was sometimes I would just listen and let you speak can I whisper your nonsense? But then I think at that time I'd already learned how to, say what I think needs to be said without necessarily being as confrontational as I would be when I was younger. so because to be honest, there are times when you have to keep quiet, but there are times when you have to actually speak up and name what is actually going on before it actually gets into you, So I think that was part of the journey for me.
So that's so interesting. You said two things that I really want to just like hone in on. But before I hone in on that, I just want to share what's coming out in this chat and the Facebook Live chat. In Facebook Live, Blessing says, we never offload emotionally and we never realize it because we never normalize addressing our emotions honestly. How articulately is that said? That is so right, Blessing, like 100%. We don't normalize addressing our issues. And I think that's something, like, I mean, we're talking about it here and it's going to serve us, but I think for a lot of us who are moms and aunts, I think the thing is about how do we also take that to our kids, right? How do we get them to talk about their emotions? How do we get them to know, how do we normalize it so that we change the patterns that we find ourselves in? Nkoti says that this is so profound. And then Skolile says this in the Zoom chat. She says, I must say, I still struggle with the same thing even now. And she says, I have a question for Tembela. Which support was a game changer for you? So maybe before I hone in on what I wanted to talk about, maybe let's take Skolile's question about what was the game changer.
I think the game changer for me, to be honest, was having a coach, because like as I was saying to you earlier, I didn't have a plan that says this is how I'm going to be dealing with these issues. I was just living life, but having a coach for me really gave me space to reflect on a lot of issues that were going on in my life which I was not aware of. And what that did was that it actually put these things on the table, on the surface, so that I can name them and I can actually see the patterns. That in fact, what I see happening here is happened there, and it has happened there, and it has happened there. And then I could actually see, like as you see the patterns, you actually realize the load that you have been carrying with you not even aware of what was going on in your life. And I think as I went through that coaching journey, I mean, it was such an exciting time for me, because I was like, I'm learning a lot about myself, to a point that I knew, for this as one thing I was so sure of, that was that I was not going to go back to work, because like to full-time work, because I needed to deal with me, because now I had quite a number of issues that I've learned about myself. And yeah, I really think that was the main game changer for me. And of course, on top of that, I began talking about my experiences with other people. And the more I talked about those experiences, the more I realized that over and above dealing with myself, I mean, there are also other people that are going through the same issues or similar issues that I was going through. And it's also that realization, like as I started talking to people, that I realized that actually I am not just going to heal just by myself. My coaching journey was had a beginning and an end. I only had 6 sessions with my coach, but I knew that there was so much that still needed to be dealt with. So I needed to find platforms of talking about these issues, and yeah. So I think I've answered the question. Yeah.
I think so. I think, I mean, what you honed in was that having a coach helped you to surface a lot of the issues and then to be able to table them and then find solutions to them. And I think what's amazing about the coaching journey, what most people don't know about being a coach, is that we don't have the answers to your problems. We don't. What we do have is a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah.
We have lots and lots of questions with the understanding of the personal development and how the human mind works. And I think with that, having that objective view and having someone talk to you about, so what's going on there? Did it happen before? When did it happen before? What do you think is happening there? Who was there when it happened? Just asking those kind of questions helps you, like you said, notice a pattern.
Yeah.
Notice a self-talk. As a coach, you would know this. When you talk to someone, you'll hear them say some repetitive things. And in that, because I'm just an objective person looking in, I can say, oh, did you notice that you say this a lot? Have you thought about why you say this a lot? And I think just having that, I mean, we'd love for you to get a coach. And please, if you are wanting a coach, reach out to Womaniko. We have a group of coaches that are willing to come alongside you and help you deal with your baggage or anything else that you might be struggling with. But it's so important for you to have a good support structure around you. Do you have a bestie? Do you have a bestie who is objective enough to ask you the hard questions you're not willing to ask yourself? You don't need a bestie who's a yabru who just says like every time you get hurt, they're like, oh, sorry, my friend, but they don't ask you the hard questions. So it's so important to have someone alongside you who's willing to journey with you, who can ask you hard questions in love. And sometimes that just might be that even in the workplace, it might be your manager. It might be another colleague who's willing to talk through situations with you and objectively look at it and ask you those questions. So I think you answered that question well in saying what you need is a coach or someone similar to a coach who's going to journey with you and help you surface what's really going on. I was telling you this, that just having a husband sometimes helps me, because I come home from a hard day of work or a hard day of sitting in my office and working, and then I go to him and I just complain about all the madness that has gone on. And like for you, who could understand self-differentiation, I too get asked, what could you have done differently? If you had a situation, what would you do? How would you do that differently? Or can you see this is not really about you? Can you see you taking this a little bit too personally? So sometimes you just need that kind of person who's going to ask you those kind of questions so you can work through it rather than just bottle it all up or just keep packing the bag and then eventually it explodes into a hot. So whenever, go for it.
Okay, so I actually want to bring in a different thing which you have alluded to a number of times, but I just think we do need to emphasize that here, that in as much as, for instance, I had a coach, fortunately for me, that coach was paid for by the organization. But I think one of the, I mean, for me, if I were to look back in all these organizations that I've been, I actually think my life would have been much easier in those roles if there was enough support systems within the organization. Because what I find is that sometimes, especially in the work context, we get thrown into work and with all the expectations from us, but also sometimes it's just the load of work. And when you don't have enough supportive systems, it actually drives people, into crazy spaces, anxiety, pressure, sicknesses and all that. And I mean, when I think about the number of times that I've not been able to sleep just because of work, and if my manager were to just do one thing, like create spaces within my work environment to say, okay, can we talk about you and not just talk about the work, but you in the work. And whether, because like for instance, one of the challenges I always find is that you can have an organization that has got systems on paper, but then it doesn't, but then you actually find there's a misalignment between what you have on paper and the practice. So you can have an organization that says, well, we have a program for coaching for staff, but if you don't give staff time so that they can actually attend their coaching sessions, you might as well not have it. So I think in as much as I think the point I want to bring up is that in as much as there is an individual responsibility, I really think that it is high time that organizations take their staff workers seriously and actually understand that these are not work beings, but these are human beings. Yeah. So I just want to bring that into the conversation. I know we are almost done with our time.
Yeah, no, time is certainly running out. But I think what's so important, you said something about human beings and not work beings, but actually we're not human doings, right? That's what the saying says.
Yes.
We're not doings, we're human beings. And so we're being right now in this moment. And I do think that workplaces definitely need support. And I think that's one of the reasons why we also very keen on hearing what you have to say and taking on what you say, because it also becomes the data we use when we do go to the workplace to say, we have representation of women from across sectors, and what they're saying is this. And so you staying plugged in with us, we really appreciate it. We don't take it for granted. And your comments and your questions really help us to frame what do we take out to workplaces when we do go and offer solutions to them. Because one of our big things is to transform spaces. I mean, that's what Women Eco is about. And that means not just the space in which you dwell and you personally, but in the places where you work as well. So that's something that we really look forward to doing, and we're hoping you'll stay plugged in. On Facebook, Nkoti says that she fully agrees about having a coach. It's the best decision ever. And she says, I too am learning a lot about myself, both the good and the bad. And then she gives you a thumbs up and says that she'll fully recommend you as a coach.
Okay.
And then Sibung, there's a Sibung also with us on Facebook, and she says, I might have missed the beginning. That's okay. But what she says is, when do you decide to have a coach? At what point do you decide? At crisis time, or when you're still feeling quite comfortable? And I think the best time to get a coach is now, irrespective of how you're feeling. The best coach is right now. And that'll serve you in ways that we can't even begin to tell you. We have case studies upon case studies and testimonials of people who just one small shift completely changed the trajectory of their life. And so we underplay coaching in this country when we're getting better at it. And so if you're looking for a coach, do it. Absolutely do it. You're not going to regret it at all. And so with that, I know we must start to close this conversation. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. I want to just highlight 3 things that Timbella said. She said, 1, it was about the self-talk. And so it's really about reframing. And so I think, if anything, sit quietly, reflect. At the end of the day, if you do reflection, then do the reflection. Understand, what are you talking to yourself? What are you saying to yourself? And can you reframe some of the narratives that you have in your mind? Secondly, she spoke about self-differentiation. So understand what you can do, what's within your remit to do, what is your locus of control. And then also understand that sometimes people put issues on you that has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with them. And you don't have a responsibility to fix others. You only have a responsibility to fix yourself. So understand self-differentiation. And the last one she spoke about was noticing patterns. And I think you can start to see that a pattern is forming either in the self-talk, or how you're taking on things that are not actually your responsibility, or just in the way you're acting out, in the behaviors that you have. Then you have to ask yourself, what emotions are driving this behavior? And how do I deal with that emotional baggage, if it is baggage that you're carrying around? I really hope that you've learned something. I hope that we've given you some insights I think these sessions sometimes every now and then we just bring them up to you just for you to gain awareness. We might not have all the solutions, but one of the biggest joys we have is to bring some awareness to you and some insight. And after that, it's for you to take that, sit with it, and then use that to help yourself get better and self-manage. I'm just going to do a quick reminder. We're doing a series called Self-Manage and Dealing with Stress, because we know during this COVID time, stress levels have increased and we want to be a resource to you. Today we dealt with baggage. And in the next 2 weeks, we'll come up with the next topic based on what you've been telling us on how we need to serve you. And don't forget that we have a campaign called Dare to See Us, that you really, Dare to Be Seen, that you really want to learn more about or go and sign up for. Check it out on our Facebook page. And with that, I'm going to say thank you so much to Tembela, who opened her baggage for us right here in the front of everybody and Facebook Live, so everyone knows her stuff now. But we do hope that this was an opportunity for you to unpack Tembela's bag so that you could rethink how you're going to unpack your bag and repack it lightly. Because if anything in life, we should travel lightly. And in traveling lightly, you learn to be agile, you can be flexible, but more than anything, which I now learn from my New York story in the subway with the oversized bag, is that when you can travel lightly, you start to enjoy the journey. And we really enjoy this journey of life. So with that, I'm going to give it to Tembela so she can say bye to you. And once again, thank you for sharing this hour with us. We don't take your time for granted. We have it an honor to spend this time with you. Tembela, for you.
Yeah, can I also read, perhaps before I thank, I read what Sko had written. I can't see share. Can you read?
I can read. So Sko says that, she said, I think I might have lost. So she said, thank you so much for unpacking your baggage. This has been quite interesting. And Kolile, I'm assuming I can read the rest of the stuff that you've written, so I'm going to quickly do that. She says, for me, my baggage has been, is being managed by people who really have an interest in my well-being and feelings. The constant behavior that displays is that you are worth and you know you can deliver for the institution and what happens in your life, and there's no room in the workplace. I struggle with this as I'm the same person who is at work and at home, and I realize that both spaces matter equally to me. That's really important. I do agree. And let me see, there was something else that came through. So Busi says, thank you. This was very insightful. And Bulelwa says, can we have part 2 of this conversation? I am struggling with when, how, and how to offload, but I am learning to travel light. Yes, that is going to be our follow-up. And what we want to tell you is that we're going to hopefully get a psychologist who's going to come and speak to this professionally. So Tembela and I are coaches and we're not psychologists, but what we do want to do is bring on a psychologist who's going to help you understand the psychology of baggage and emotional baggage especially. So yes, Bulelwa, we hear you and we hear you. We hear you and we're definitely going to do a part 2 for this. Okay, Tembela, you can say bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Chef, for holding the space. As always, I enjoy having these, offloading platforms and spaces and times with you. And thanks so much to those who joined us today. I was actually, I think I was writing somewhere or reflecting yesterday, and I was thinking, I'm sure people are saying these two, they just like to come and, just drop their package, their dirty linen in front of us. But the truth is, we don't do this just because we want to, what's the right word? We just want to share our dirty linen with everybody. We actually do this as part of our own healing. But also, I think for me, the big thing is giving confidence to other people to know that it's okay actually to feel vulnerable. It's okay to talk about this stuff that we always, like to keep within us. Because honestly, I wouldn't want to travel my journey like the way share whilst traveling to New York. So I do need moments where I just have to offload. And so I'm so grateful for you too. That you spend this hour with us and listen to us and for engaging us. So we will see you in the next one. Fortunately, I will not be on the hot seat. Perhaps Mulela will be.
Well, thank you once again.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to thank the people who are on Facebook as well. We will continue to engage with everyone on Facebook. Yeah, follow us on Umaniko. Please share your good stories with us about what's happening in your workplaces and during this difficult time that we all find ourselves in. Because I believe when we share our stories, we can change the world. You can unmute. And
Everyone can unmute and say hi and bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you.
Lucy. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Mkaya.
Thanks, Kaya. That was really, really, really powerful.